Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more History Matters, and today we are asking the question of how harsh was the Treaty of Versailles really? A short animated documentary. Now, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. Would love to join the Discord, follow me over at Twitch, and please do go check out the two gaming channels here on YouTube. Blah, 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 blah. How harsh was the Treaty of Versailles? Now, I have always been one that has kind of said that it has been harsh, at least I feel disproportionately harsh on the German people and not so on the people in power. Um, you know, now was Germany very, very, essentially the strongest in World War One? Yes, did they I guess gave the Allies the most trouble. And so from one perspective, it does make sense that they would be, right? A lot of the cost is then put on Germany because really, if it weren't for Germany, cost of the war wouldn't have been as high as it was. Um, so it's one of those back and forth things where you're like, I understand why Germany is getting this amount of blame, right? Is getting the brunt of the cost put on them. But at the same point, right, of course, we have the benefit of hindsight of being like, they are causing the conditions to create their future enemy. They are causing the conditions that will allow for the rise of Hitler. And so, of course, our modern perspective on the Treaty of Versailles is going to forever be tainted by the bias that we have because of our knowledge of hindsight of them, of Hitler. Had the Treaty of Versailles not been so harsh on Germany, Hitler, I believe, would not have risen to power. Um, so, but anyways, that's wandering into what if territory. Let's just talk about how harsh the Treaty of Versailles was.
The Treaty of Versailles is one of the most famous treaties in human history and is one with a mixed reputation.
The Treaty of Peace between the winners and Belgium and Germany, about how this was all totally Germany's fault and they should pay up and never start a world war again. Shame on you. I'm surprised the Treaty of Peace is actually not called, that they didn't do the joke of the Treaty of Peace between the winners and Japan. Because Japan kind of got shafted a bit in the Treaty of Peace, I feel like.
Signed in the wake of the Entente's victory over the German Empire, it did several things. It limited the size of the German army, demilitarized the Rhineland, demanded huge amounts of reparations, and, perhaps most importantly, forced Germany to relinquish these lands. And many people decry the Treaty of Versailles as being unreasonably harsh on Germany. Now you should know this video isn't going to talk about whether or not Versailles caused World War II. It is, however, going to ask one question.
I already said it did. Air covered.
Just how harsh was the Treaty of Versailles really? Well, the best way to figure this out is to look at contemporary treaties and those from just before World War I to see what the norm was.
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss.
Now, obviously, World War I was a much bloodier, more brutal conflict than Europe had seen before up until this point, and so that should be taken into account. So, in the context of the rest of the World War I peace treaties, Versailles wasn't actually very harsh. Austria-Hungary, via the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye and the Treaty of Trianon, was completely dismantled. The Austrian half of the empire lost these territories to its neighbours, many of whom were brand new nations. It was the Hungarian half that had it the worst, though. Much like Versailles, Trianon limited the size of the Hungarian military, demanded war reparations, and also took territory. Germany lost 8% of its total land and 10% of its total pre-war population to the treaty, whereas Hungary was stripped of 70% of its lands and 65% of its pre-war population, so I think we can safely say that Trianon was certainly harsher. Of course, comparing Versailles to the other World War I treaties isn't too useful since it was the same war and the same victorious countries negotiating them. So what about Germany's previous peace treaties? How harsh were they in comparison to Versailles? And the first that we'll look at is the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. This was signed between the victorious Central Powers led by Germany and the newly formed Russian-Soviet Federative Social Republic.
I wouldn't use Brest-Litovsk though, because again, that is also still World War One. I would go 1870, maybe as far back as 1870.
What this did was formalise the defeat of the Russian Empire and demonstrate what Germany expected a defeated nation to give up, which was a lot. The Russian Empire was stripped of about 30% of its population, depending on whether or not you count places like Finland, whom the communist authorities had relinquished claims on anyway. In terms of land, the amount stripped
Stalin.
away wasn't much in comparison to the massive Russian Empire. It was, however, the densely populated, heavily industrialized regions that Russia was to lose. It was also ordered to pay about 6 billion marks in compensation to Germany. In comparison, the Treaty of Versailles ordered Germany to pay 130 billion marks, although the Allies only really expected to receive a third of that. And in terms of industrial losses, Germany lost barely any capacity. Of course, this does ignore the fact that the Rhineland, the industrial heartlands of Germany, were to be occupied for 15 years. Although 15 years is obviously better than forever. So in comparison to Brest-Litovsk, Versailles seems much more lenient. So what about before the First World War? Well, the most obvious treaty to look at is the Treaty of Frankfurt, which brought to an end the 1870 Franco-Prussian War. Famously, this saw the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine by Germany, with France losing roughly 4% of its population and 2.5% of its lands. Furthermore, the French had to pay 5 billion francs in reparations, about 3 years' worth of government income. The figure that Versailles demanded was about 20 years of government income. So,
Okay, I love that comparison of scope there with the payouts of this is this amount of years and then this is that amount of.
to conclude, just how harsh was Versailles comparatively? Well, frankly, not very. In fact, it was fairly run-of-the-mill in terms of its demands. Nations that lost wars were expected.
I think economically it was harsh. I will disagree here. I think in terms of land size, yes, it wasn't. But in terms of economic, 20 years of that's a lot.
Expected to lose land and to pay reparations, although in Germany the loss of lands largely included the loss of Germans too. What made Versailles so difficult for the German people to swallow was that it deprived them of their pride. However, on the upside for them, the original French plans of carving Germany up like Austria-Hungary never happened, so it wasn't as harsh as it could have been. I
Yeah.
hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching, with thanks to my Patreon supporters.
And so that was how harsh Treaty of Versailles was, really a short animated documentary by History Matters. I think they could have probably actually gone a bit longer on this one. I think this was actually too short. I think maybe double the runtime. I think they could have fit. I think more talking about more treaties and perhaps in a bit more depth would have benefited this kind of question. I think leaving it felt like we didn't get quite too in depth enough on the discussions of the not only I think in regards to this, I think we need to not only look at the treaties themselves and what they are demanding and what is then applied, but also what occurs immediately after, right? And in the other treaties you don't see like an economic collapse, because they are more, I would say, proportionally plausible to be paid off, the reparation. But here, for like the first time ever, we have governments demanding 20 years essentially of income or whatever the fuck they phrased it as. And that is extreme. I think that, granted, yes, World War I is extremely expensive, but also you don't want to create, the socioeconomic environment that will lend itself to, hatred and animosity, which will then only lead to more war down the line, right? And demanding that much money really only leads to animosity. So, and economic hardships, which lends itself to the rise of certain leaders. So I do think Treaty of Versailles was disproportionately harsh in that sense. In the sense of land, no. But in the sense of economic cost, yes. Because also, right, Germany has also fought 4 years of war. Their ability to pay that money is gone, right? They don't have like their pre-war ability to pay those kind of costs. So, again, we're running in right. It's me, like proportionally speaking, with the Treaty of Frankfurt, right, the Austro-Hungarians and the French were more capable of paying those off because the wars didn't essentially destroy the countries, didn't demand as much national cost as say World War One did, right? So like again, that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.